UDLing the IEP. Okay, let's go. Here we go. All right, friends. So we're going to start off with a little story. You ready? Once upon a time, before COVID, I was invited to Hong Kong. Have you heard this one, Katie? My Hong Kong story?
Yes.
You have. Okay, I'll do it. Okay, so I'm inviting. I got invited to Hong Kong. I'm so excited to speak in Hong Kong. It's the first time I have spoken outside of North America. My wife is super pumped. So we go to Hong Kong, and I'm a confident traveler because I travel around the world quite a bit. And oh, good, we have someone from Hong Kong. Perfect. You're going to love this story. So I get invited to Hong Kong and I start booking my travel, and I realize that I need support pretty quickly. Like, so for example, I there's a language barrier, right? Now I can't change that about myself, that I can't speak the local language like immediately. And so I'm trying to navigate that barrier. And the organization that booked me, they were so great. They're like, oh my goodness, no, we anticipated that you probably would have a language barrier. We're going to give you access to a translator. And I'm like, thank you so much. I feel so supported. So then I'm going to book my once I get there, and I go to try and rent a car. And they're like, you can't rent a car here. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because you can't drive here. And I'm like, but I have a license. They're like, no, well, you have the license, but there's rules of the road and you don't know them. You know, we anticipate your needs. We're going to get you a driver. I'm like, oh, thank you. I feel so supported. Thank you so much. Then I get to the event and I'm wandering around trying to figure out how to get. Hong Kong is a busy place, my friends. Beautiful, busy place. And the organization is like, oh, Shelly, don't worry. We have a host for you. You're going to be so supported. We anticipated your needs. I'm like, thank you so much. So day one, I'm feeling super supported. I have 3 Hong Kong paraprofessionals following me around everywhere I go. After the second and the third day, I'm like, wow, I'm not doing anything for myself. My independence actually decreased in Hong Kong because I had these paraprofessionals follow me around everywhere I go. Now, don't get me wrong. They were very helpful, but it was almost too helpful. And I wasn't challenged at all. Because they did everything for me. So then a week later, when I go to Toronto, Toronto is also a very busy place, but I have more experience in Toronto. There isn't a language barrier. I can drive a car there. I didn't need a host. And like me here, I'm the exact same person in Hong Kong as I am in Toronto, as I am in Vancouver. But depending on where I was, totally impacted my success and independence in that place. Okay. But what I realized, and this is what really hit me, is that this is what people think inclusion is. If there's a need that a student has, let's give them a person. And it's very well-meaning people. Like my Hong Kong educational systems were lovely. They were lovely, lovely people, but I actually became less independent. And we see this in the research, right? Like if the benefits of inclusion are around the shared experiences between peers. And if kids are only working with adults, it actually like inhibits interactions. But what I realized is that was also really expensive to have 3 one-on-one support adults with me in Hong Kong. But if I look at myself in Toronto and Hong Kong, I was more independent in Toronto. I was more successful in Toronto, but I also didn't change. I was the same person in both places. And what I often see when we're talking about special education and inclusion, we think often all of our resources need to go towards the individual who needs support. But if all the resources are going towards me, it's actually too much and it doesn't help anybody else. So really, what made an impact for me was not the support adults. What had an impact on me was that there was fewer barriers around me in Toronto. Having fewer barriers in the context actually helped me to be more independent and required, oh, my dog's coming to say hi, and required fewer resources. Wow, Ruthie. Ruthie is home. Okay, so this idea, Ruthie, do you want to say hi? Look, Ruthie. Oh, she's busy. You want to say hi? Hi. So this idea of barrier is really where I see like the UDL coming in. So if you look at this person in front of the stairs, they're trying to get to the top of the stairs. Does this person have individualized support? Yes, they have a chair. Like that is individualized to them. But so they're going to need some resources, but is that enough? Like, Katie, is the chair enough for this person to get to the top of the stairs?
No, that's
No.
kind of like it's a tuna noodle casserole staircase.
Totally. It's not enough. It's not enough. And so what I often see in like jurisdictions is if someone's not having success, we put all of our resources into the individual and we don't save any for the context. And the thing, it becomes a sinkhole because you can put all the resources you want into individuals, but then they still aren't meeting the goal. And so we actually are really good at understanding this in the physical world. Like no one has said to me, the problem is the person. The problem is the stairs. But then what if I said that this wasn't a physical barrier? What if I said that someone's having a hard time behaviorally? What if I said someone's having a hard time emotionally? What if I said someone's having a hard time in learning? We zoom right back into, oh, the person needs support, the person needs support. And we forget about the stairs, but it's the stairs that have a huge impact on increasing independence and decreasing resources. Now, some people say to me, yeah, but I like the stairs. And this is where like you can still meet people's needs without abandoning the stairs. And so when we talk about multiple pathways, we're talking about adding to the stairs. This is in addition to the stairs. So it's not taking anything away. And so it's this very, very fine balance between what do individuals need, but then also what needs to happen in the context. So the vision of IEPs is really about, well, what if we could communicate to classroom teachers, what are the individual needs of a person for sure, but then also what are some things that could happen around them that are going to reduce barriers to increase success and independence. Can we pause so that I can deal with my dog? Just chat.
Yeah,
just in the chat box.
I got you.
Something that's useful because this animal right
now
is going to get adopted in a second.
Okay, I got you. Hold on. Maybe we mute while we take care of Ruthie. Okay. Shelly's going to come back in a minute and she's going to share a little bit more about how do we transition from this like medical model, disability, have to fix the person, to more of a social model. How do we fix the conditions around? And, as I was saying before, Shelly went into her section here, was that like, in theory, I can decode, right? But I can only decode if the conditions are right. The context is everything, because it's like the lights have to be on, my contact lens prescription has to be accurate. I can't have a headache. I get these ocular migraines that don't hurt, but like they just make my eyes a little twirly, like a cartoon.
That sounds awful. I'm so sorry.
Like it happened once when I was teaching. I remember I was teaching and like we were just doing this really short passage of a text and a kid was explaining something. And I would always say, you have to cite your text. And he's like, okay, like if you go into, and I opened it and I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, I can't see. And they're like, what? And I'm like, go get Mrs. Tolman's, I can't see. And it turned out ocular migraine. Hook us up if you've had an ocular migraine here in the chat, because it is bananas. It's bananas. So yeah, Casey, you're just like, woo.
Oh,
so
for
anyway,
sure.
I gave them a little preview. Look at all of those. Look at all of us. We're a happy family. Oh, Megan, I would not want to get it while driving. Oh my God.
Be awful.
It's like a tunnel. Okay, so I gave them a little preview while you were where you're putting your dog somewhere that dogs go. We talked about shifting from like this medical model to social model. So you're ready
that's where we're going. That's where we're going, because as we all know, special education evolved out of a medical model. Fix the person. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want you to imagine a place. Okay, it could be any place. This can be Hong Kong. This can be a birthday party. This can be a classroom. I'm going to talk about a classroom because we're talking education right now, but this is so much bigger than just education. How we were all taught to view kids who are struggling is through a medical model of disability. Okay, well, we're well-meaning, like I can't say that enough times. And we were taught that if someone is not having success, and what that looks like in a classroom is we have kids who have challenging behavior, we're having kids who are disengaged, we have kids who are increasing in anxiety, non-attendance. Like we know what it looks like when kids are struggling, okay? And so what we were taught to do was if there's a student who is struggling, we need to find out what's wrong. It totally is a triage model, Sherry. You're absolutely right. And so what happens is we have to find out what's wrong because something's wrong. And so then they go get assessed, they go get diagnosed, and we write an IEP for them. And this is how we were taught to view students. But if we think about then the stairs, that doesn't talk about the stairs at all, right? And if you think about when you go to the doctor when something is wrong and they assess you and they diagnose you. And if they can't, they send you to a specialist. Like our entire special education model is around this. And so then this IEP is designed to fix a student so they can then go back into the classroom. But we get to this point in education where you can't fix disability because disability isn't broken. Disability is an identity. So it becomes this like sinkhole of resources of trying to fix kids. You can't fix kids. And then inclusion comes around and we're like, we'll just send them back even if they're not ready. So then teachers are really, really struggling because they're like, but they're not fixed. They're still having challenging behavior, but it's because we actually haven't solved the problem, which is what are the barriers that are getting in the way? So a really great metaphor for this isn't my metaphor, but it's a good one, is that quote that says, if a flower doesn't bloom, like you look at the environment, not the flower. Like it's very, very easy to cut a flower, like a dying flower out of a garden. Your garden looks great again. You can put it in the compost, but flowers die for a reason. They need water, they need more sunlight. And so if we don't actually ask the question, what's happening around the flower, more flowers are going to die. Plus, the disability community is being like, hi, I'm not broken. Here I am. This is who I am. I like me. And so it's looking at disability, not from a medical perspective, but from an identity perspective, that we need disability as much as we need everything. It's a part of who we are as humans. So why are we fixing it? It's not about fixing it. So then how do we respond to the needs of people with disabilities? That's very different than responding to the disability of disabilities. So the disability community has said, there's another way where you can meet our needs. It's called the social model of disability, which is if there's someone who's struggling, like a person who can't get up the stairs, maybe it's the context that we need to assess. Maybe it's the context around the individual that's getting, like, what are the barriers that are getting in the way? So if you think about the garden, there are things that all flowers need. All flowers need light. All plants need light. They need space. They need moisture. They need to be free of pests. And so when we think about kids in a classroom, there's going to be needs that all kids have, because all kids have needs, even if they don't have disabilities. Okay. And so thinking about it from this perspective, it's okay. If we can attend to the context, then we support all of the flowers. If we make sure that the garden has water, all of the flowers will benefit. And so it's more looking at a student who's struggling as almost a symptom that something's wrong around them. So if we can figure out what the barrier is for one and reduce it for everybody, it's going to benefit many students, which is where the UDL gets really efficient. Now, I got to tell you what happened next. So I show this slide, and a teacher that I was working with was like, Shelly, but our gardens are not one flower. Like, we have like diverse gardens. We're not just growing one plant. So how does the social model work if all of our plants have different needs? And I'm like, okay, that's a really, really, really good point. It's almost like we need a combination of the two. So then I go digging and I find a third model. And it's called the person-place model of need. So the first thing I love about this is that it's not about disability, it's about needs, which frees disability up to be an identity. Okay, so now we're just talking about the needs of all kids. This isn't about autism. This isn't about learning disability. This is about what needs do people with autism have, similarly to what needs do people who are Italian have. Like, it's oh my goodness, Ananda, totally. Like, don't even get me started on the problems of monoculture. Like, biodiversity is critical, right? So let's plan for the needs of all kids. You may have 5 kids with autism, but you might have 30 kids who need support with social skills and communication. And so it frees disability up. Now let's look at needs. So in a person place model, it says, and Katie already talked about this, it says that a person's needs are actually not dependent on their disability. They can be connected, but really it's more connected to where they are and their context at any given moment in time. So you may have some needs in Hong Kong and different needs in Toronto, right? And so it's looking at the interaction between who you are and where you are. Succulents needs are different. I mean, Alicia, right? This teacher, she's like, I have cactuses and I have orchids and temperamental plants that bloom once every 17 years. Like, what do you do when there's different plants? So the person place model says, first we look, what does everybody need? What does everybody need? There are basic needs for everybody. And if we have one student who's struggling, you can guarantee there's going to be a handful of other kids that are struggling, just maybe not enough to qualify. So attending to the whole garden is always going to benefit more than one. So let's look at what are some like needs. You can even design for individuals, but as universal as possible, you're always going to benefit more than one flower. Okay. If you think about a garden, there's going to be needs that everybody has. And so if you look at kind of like the infrastructure of education, you could be the best teacher on the planet. There are always going to be learning needs. Just because kids are different, there's always going to be equity needs because the system wasn't designed to be inclusive or equitable. And so UDL is one of those frameworks that just assumes from the start, like Katie says, the variability. There's always going to be kids who have who need learning support. That's going to be our sunlight. So let's just look at how we can reduce barriers to learning. There are many different needs that students have. UDL is one. If we look at equity, we could talk about anti-racism is going to reduce barriers. Culturally responsive teaching is going to reduce barriers. There's a lot of efforts in terms of SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity. Those are going to reduce barriers. I mean, if you look at, when we talk about reducing barriers to equity, we're talking about how do we specifically reduce barriers for students who've experienced marginalization and oppression. So, and I mean, like the intersections are huge. UDL is can go across both of those. UDL is designed for learning, but it's going to affect so much more. So if we can look at kind of the big rocks, right? What do all kids need? What do all classrooms need? What that's going to do is bring down the crisis. It's going to bring down the crisis so that we can actually look and see what the needs are. If you think of a garden, if there's no water, every flower is going to look like they're dying. It doesn't matter what their individual needs are. So if we can take care of the needs of everybody, then we can reduce that crisis to say, okay, well, how does this flower differ from this flower? How are the needs of this student different from the student within this context? So then this is where we got this idea of, because some plants, just like, who was it, Alicia, some plants need more space. Some plants need more light. Some plants need companion growth. Marigolds go great with tomatoes because they keep the slugs away. You know, I mean, there's strategies we can implement so that plants can grow together, but we can't even get there if there's crisis. And so that person place model, the place is the stairs. Let's just make it so that we have as little barriers as possible around, and then we can look at the individual needs that students have. So this is where the seed packet came in, because I was like, well, then what's the point of IEPs? What's the point of IEPs? And then I'm thinking, what if I was a gardener? What if I was a gardener and I had all these different plants and I'm trying to figure out what I need to do so that all my plants grow. I may not have the experience or knowledge to know about every single plant. I'm going to call Katie up because she may have knowledge on a specific plant. But the idea here is there has to be a place where we can go that we can learn more about a plant and how to help it grow. And so then I'm thinking, what if we thought of IEPs in this way, right? An IEP that actually communicates to a classroom teacher the needs of a particular plant, the needs of a particular student in terms of who they are, what they need to grow, what conditions do they need in the environment. And this is where the seed packet came from, because I actually really believe in IEPs. They have a really important role in terms of advocacy for some students who need the most support. But how do we build them in ways that support the garden, not support the changing of the plant? And so here's one little example. This is a mom who's a good friend of mine who has a little guy with Down syndrome, and she like took this to heart, and she designed herself.
So is this Connor's mom designed Connor's seed packet?
Yes. So like, no, like Danielle was just like, I'm gonna do this for my kid, and so they came together as a family and created what would Connor's seed packet look like. And so you can see here's the vision statement. Why is he amazing? Why is he incredible? What are his strengths? What is he going to offer to your garden? What doesn't work in his garden? What does work in his garden? What does he love? And how is he growing? And what was cool was that usually, like when I first started learning about IEPs, they were like locked up in a cupboard and I couldn't read them. But what was neat about this is that Connor was so proud of this. He like handed it out to the grocery store, to the swimming pool, like all the places that he went, because he wanted people to know. No, he wanted people to know who he was. You know, like that's so different than like these like deficit-based documents. And that's exactly it, Autumn, is that every time I show this, they're like, well, why don't we just do this for all kids? I'm like, exactly. Why not? Like, why do IEPs have to be something different? How about we look at it in terms of this is a way to get to know who a kid is, how they grow, and what they need to grow, not how does Connor need to change. And I showed this at one presentation, and the teacher, she was a grade 2 teacher, and she took this and she worked exactly, Dawn, with families to create one of these for all the kids. And then she put it on an envelope, like one of those 9x12 envelopes. And every month, the students got to choose something they had done that month that they were really proud of, that showed how they'd grown in their goal areas. And this was every kid in the classroom. So that by the end of the year, the students had a seed packet filled with how they grew, and it was the most beautiful portfolio. And like the kids were proud of it, the families were proud of it, the teachers knew what to do, it was connected to what everyone was doing. And so I think that, you know, it's not that everyone needs to be on an IEP, but it's like thinking about, you know, what we do for one can help others. And so, you know, like making this, and obviously there was more to the IEP than this, but this was the first page. This is the first thing you saw about who this kid was. And I just think, like, is that not what the point is? Is like, what are we doing for an individual learner to value who they are and help them grow, as opposed to look at what's wrong and how do we fix them? Like, I just think the whole emphasis of how we address individuals can change, but really thinking about this document now could help inform what the whole garden needs. And so it was kind of a really neat way to kind of see the potential in how IEPs could evolve. This is something that we're trying in British Columbia. George says, who's in charge of writing these? Yeah, that's a great question. So the special education teacher is kind of the collator or the facilitator, working with the student and the family to build this, but also pulls in the classroom teacher for those specific goals. I'm seeing a lot of questions around like, oh my goodness, Brenda, that's exactly, I'm so glad you said that. So Brenda says this would be a great replacement for present levels of performance. That's exactly what this was used for. We added strengths and stretches. I'll include a link on my website to the actual formal template that we used. But that's exactly, so we do this at the very beginning of school for kids, kind of that first 6 weeks. IEPs are kind of due at the end of October. And so that's what we did for all kids. We work with kids and families to develop their vision statement, to look at their strengths and stretches. And then the second half of this is, okay, you know, what are the actual now curricular goals? So, I mean, I have a whole course on this, but I wanted to just kind of show you that idea that an IEP can be looked at as, you know, what works for one can be applied to a whole garden. You know, it becomes a blueprint rather than something extra to do. The other part that I wanted to show you is, you know, sometimes the most valuable resource in terms of finding out what kids need to grow and what kids need to like having goals and you know what they need in their garden is actually to ask the student and the parents and the families and the communities who they are and what they need. And so this was another strategy that we did with the students to start their IEP process was we did interviews and just asked kids, like, what do you like to do? What do you do with your family? What are your hopes and dreams? We asked parents about this, and this gave us such good, I mean, we talk about data-driven decisions all the time, but this was actually data from the student and the family, which was like so valuable. It was absolutely a person-centered plan. For students that did have, who communicated in ways other than words, we had an adapted version, which I'll send you. This was a student in grade 4. She was just learning to use her augmentative communication device. And so we were looking at what options to put into the device. And so we took that same, this is what all the students were doing. So we took those same questions and created an inventory for people who knew Junie the most. So we talked to mom, we talked to dad, we talked to cousin, we talked to her. So Maddie was a younger cousin. I love this story. The family asked Maddie, what do you know about Junie? And so one of the questions was, what is Junie interested in? And he's like, whale sharks. And so when they came in for the IEP meeting, they had this. And the mom, Rita, she was like, Shelly, I don't know if Junie likes whale sharks. I think Maddie likes whale sharks. And I'm like, it actually doesn't matter, because I'm going to show you what we did. For each one of these, we created a visual choice board in her communication device. So we could ask her all of the same questions we were asking the class, like, what are some of your interests? What do you want to learn more about? And this is what she chose. She chose the whale shark. And let me tell you, Maddie, he's like, I knew it. I knew it. You guys, I knew it. I knew Junie like, so I mean, you know, so often, you know, you can get so many generic visual boards or whatever on the internet. But what I loved about this is that these were visuals entered into her device that were specifically designed based on who knew Junie the most. We also asked some classmates. We talked to the teacher. We talked to the paraprofessional in this class. And so it was kind of neat to kind of see that, you know, kids know what they like. We often don't give them an opportunity to share their voice in ways that can be captured. And so it was just a cute little example of, you know, wait a second, is there ways that we can do this IEPs in ways that align a little bit more universal to what anyone could do. So this is what the formal seed packet looks like. So this is the first page of the IEP for all kids in British Columbia. So you got a picture. We have students have to create some sort of profile, and this is from their profile, so that you could either interview students, they could create a seed packet. And so this is directly from what Junie said on her seed packet. And then we did the same thing and this, like, I think it was Brenda, it was like, this is current level of performance, capturing what are the strengths and stretches right now for this student. So you can see there's an opportunity for the student to respond, and there's an opportunity for the team to also respond. So that's the parents, that's support staff, that's teachers. And so it just was a really neat way to say, okay, who is this kid right now? And then where the goals came from was drawn from this information as well as other information. But we just realized that, like, you know, such a key piece of IEPs is to develop self-determination. But IEPs have become something we do for kids, not with kids and their families. And so just having that student voice front and center and really actually showing that we're responding to them as opposed to doing it for them, I think is where you start to see students, you know, knowing who they are and what they need and what their goals are. And from like K to 12, I've seen kids be able to contribute to this in different ways. But it's amazing how even our language changes when we know a student is reading it, and it just became so much more strength-based. So it's near and dear to my heart. This is my whole next book that's coming out is inclusive and strength-based IEPs. But Megan, as a principal, I wonder what my staff, honestly, there was a staff that did this. They did that who am I profile to be like, who are we and what do we need? What are the goals that we need to work on? And that actually created the professional development plan for the school was based on the seed packets that teachers had made for themselves and support staff. So there's a whole bunch of directions you could go in, but it's just really trying to move away from that planning based on deficit to being responsive to strengths and needs, with that really centering the student and the family's voice. Oh my goodness. I'm going to post all of these templates for you. So everything I've shown you today, I will put on, I'll put my website here, blogsomemore.com. We are a garden of learners. I mean, exactly. So blogsomemore.com. I have a link that I have a button that says handouts, and I will make a link for this. I'll make a dashboard for this group that will have all of these templates for you to play around with. And I know we may not be able to change IEPs, but no one says you can't add to them. And so that's how we started this process, is we just added this to the IEP and slowly evolved it over time. So I think it's so possible, and the feedback we're getting from families and students is just really huge.